Today's argument is a powerful one, literally. We are talking about what's been going down since the release of this season, since the release of 11.1, to our characters. Because going back in history, pretty much never happened to have a situation like this one. We are at a first this season, so it's good to try to gauge the players' response to this first time thing we are seeing, to see if it could be a good thing going in the future seasons of the game, or perhaps something that we can bench, we can shelf and forget forever. You know, much like the attempts of Blizzard to make things like island expeditions a thing, right? Or even Torghast, or these kind of extra activities added mid-season, or even as a big selling point of an expansion that failed awfully and were, since forgotten. What we are talking about that happened for the first time in this patch is the delayed, basically the mid-season power increase of your characters. Usually, when a season comes out, you get a full new set of item level. You go up roughly some 30 or so item levels, and then eventually the raid bosses, but even the Mythic Plus dungeons might get nerfed, or nerfed a lot from Blizzard. That's basically your prospect in the season. You get item level through looting gear from Mythic Plus keys, from the bosses, or from your vault. That's basically what it is. Now, this season, we have gotten the returning extra, which was a first since the Season 1 of The War Within, which was the stacking raid buff. As an extra way to better and more smoothly balance the difficulty of the raid over time, we have been getting the 3% stacking damage buff, which was shortened from last season, since last season you were increasing at 2.25% every couple of weeks instead of 3%, and that was the first thing. After that, we have also gotten this Turbo Boost event, which gave us 6 more item levels across all of our characters. This is similar, but even bigger than what we got in Dragonflight back when Blizzard introduced the Myth-Track level. Blizzard saw back then that early Mythic raid bosses became useless because their item level was just too low. It was practically the same level as Hero Track gear from Mythic Plus, so they added this Myth-Track upgrade system to make those early level bosses more valuable. But what we get here, a Myth-Track system that gives you 6 more item levels across your gear, including your crafted gear, is much larger in scale. On top of that, we also got the dinar system. What was previously limited to the meme seasons of Season 4 of Shadowlands and Season 4 of Dragonflight, so no new real raid, just re-clearing older raids in a much easier version. So the season wasn't nearly as competitive, there was no race to world first. It was much more laid back, so it was more of a for fun season, so having a system which allowed you to quickly get your best in slot, especially while having a raid situation where the raids would cycle every week, so you didn't even have every week the chance to get the items you wanted, so you had a vendor for your best in slot. Instead, now it comes in Season 2 of the patch, basically halfway through the expansion, which can also give you a significant power jump depending on how unlucky you have been with your trinkets especially. And then now you also get your helmet enchant, which should be in the realm of a 2% damage or 2% healing buff halfway through this season. With all these things combined, you have the stacking raid buff, the helmet enchant, you have the 6 item level jump from the gear upgrade of 2 more upgrade levels of the Myth-Track gear, you have the dinar system giving you your best in slot trinkets, even maybe a Justor Diamond if you want it, or rather if you get to kill Galliwix in Mythic, and even in 11.1.7 we are going to have a repeat of the Circe's Circlet, another, pseudo short-term borrowed power, this time going in your belt. Now, what all of this power given to us well after the season has launched? Because all of this power, yes, the raid buff was over time, but by this point, for example, in this very week, I think 12 of the patch, we are getting the 12% damage and healing buff at Renown 13. The Turbo Boost event came out, on week 11. These horrific visions came out on week 12. So we are basically almost 3 months into the patch. That's when the massive power jump started to come out for our characters. Now, this is a good question, as in, is this a good way, for example, to get players to be more engaged in the season, right? Because what many players can complain about, or maybe it isn't even a complaint, it's just something that you come to terms with, you learn to live with. When a patch comes out, you play a bunch at the release, you do a bunch of, the new Mythic Plus dungeons, you get a lot more gear, you start trying out the raid as well, maybe you are even a Mythic raider yourself. But then, as time goes by, you lose a bit more interest in Mythic Plus. Even if you're a raider, maybe you just stick to raid logging only. One of the bigger dopamine rushes and one of the bigger incentives to play the game is gear. Is when you feel like you're getting power, you're improving in power, like how, for example, you get the itch to play more whenever you start playing an alt, because your alt is a scuffed, hobo, thrash geared guy, so you have in front of you a whole bunch of dungeons or delves or raids to do, trying to get more gear, so it gets more exciting, and then your alt ends up reaching more or less the same level of power on your main, and guess what? You also lose the excitement of playing that character as well. So with this system coming halfway through mid-patch, basically, they are kind of artificially giving us more incentive, more reason to keep playing our characters. For example, even if you had, let's just say, 3 different characters right now that you wanted to be playing, maybe you played a couple of them in your raids and one of them was your meta guy from Mythic Plus. This Turbo Boost event comes out and now you are looking at some 20 Mythic Plus keys you have to do at plus 12 on 3 different characters if you want to push all of them by 6 item levels, right? That would definitely get you to play the game more, as opposed to previous seasons. If you didn't have this event in previous seasons, would you have still been playing so many Mythic Plus keys right now, some 3 months into the patch, for example? That is the interesting question for today. If this is something that can be seen in the future as a thing now that you can expect throughout the patch, as a way to get players back that itch of feeling like they have a lot to do because their character has a lot of ways to improve its gear, to improve its item level. Just like you have that feeling as soon as the patch launches. We have to do this weekly event, this other weekly event, we have to cap Valor Stones, we have to cap a couple of different quests every week. We have to do some 8 Mythic Plus dungeons, we also have to do some from raiding as well. All of this feeling of busyness which happens at the release of the season, which slowly over time you just kind of lose. When's the last time you have obsessively done 8 Mythic Plus dungeons per week on your main? Or on multiple characters, for example. Compared to now, where, of course, if you wanted to power up your character again, you would have needed to do even more, well more than just 8 Mythic Plus dungeons per week. To me, it definitely feels like a great idea to get players more into the game again. It's one of the biggest problems, as we have seen patch after patch, the player retention throughout a season when your patch lasts like 6 months. It's kind of hard to expect players to still be excited whenever they play their character in the first couple of months compared to when they are in month 4 or month 5 of the season. At that point, you have practically 0 upgrades left on your character, at least on your main or mains that you play, so there is much less to look forward to every week. Remember, the first few weeks of the season, the excitement of your Tuesday NA reset or Wednesday EU reset, logging in and checking out the vaults on like 4 different characters, knowing that, most of those were going to be an upgrade, of course, because your characters were still decked in like previous season gear or scuffed gear from the first few weeks of the season. All these are feelings that you will eventually lose throughout the patch, and these systems, these mid-season power increases, can be a way to give you back that kind of feeling, to get you to play again and get more excited about gearing up again. If it comes from multiple different avenues, even better. You can get the new enchant from your helmet, you have the dinar system, now you also have the 6 item levels on your gear, which will mostly be crests from Mythic Plus or even crests from the delves that you can go and do. So it does seem like a pretty good system to get players to play again. Obviously, players who were already perfectly fine with how things were going. So the players that were fine playing less, or the players who were fine playing just one character, might not enjoy this nearly as much, right? I was perfectly fine raid logging a couple of times or 3 times a week. I don't care much about Mythic Plus, and now I've just been told if I still want to raid with my, expected power level as the rest of my group, I have to go back and do a whole bunch of Mythic Plus to empower all of my gear again. But I think those players can be sacrificed for the greater good of increasing player retention by bringing player power back into the season several months after it has launched, right? Because it's practically an inverse graph, the graph between the interest in the game versus your player power. The more powerful you become, the less interest players get throughout the season because they feel like they have less avenues to do their favorite thing, which is powering up your character. So these kind of avenues coming out mid-season can be a good way to get players to play more. Again, on what otherwise would have been a pretty dull and boring situation right now, unless you were trying to push Mythic Plus, for example, which is like less than 1%, well, less than 1% of the player base, or even pushing PvP rating in BGs and arenas, which is even less than 1% of the player base. So it's already a very small part of the player base. Or if you were halfway through in the midst of re-rolling or playing a different character, playing an alt, so your alt was still like 623 item level, so you had a bunch of things you had to do for that character, then if you were doing neither, you didn't feel that much connected to this season. But now with more power available for you to get again, more players would get excited in playing the season again. Obviously, you still have a few problems. It's hard for you to be excited, for example, if you are playing Havoc and your alt is Feral and your second alt is Windwalker, because you know that all 3 of these specs will start getting comfortably denied from Mythic Plus keys as soon as you get into the 14 to 15 range. So then we enter the danger zone of having to talk about balancing, especially in Mythic Plus. You might get players excited about gearing, you might get players excited about becoming stronger again, but if 3 months into the season, those players already know all of that power would go to waste anyways because their characters aren't meta right now. Yeah, that could be the other problem right now. Not just powering up your character mid-season, but perhaps finding a way to just shuffle the meta a little bit. A mega balance tuning update which completely guts Vengeance and Boomy and Unholy and changes the meta completely in Mythic Plus, or something we mentioned already, introducing a different system of rating in Mythic Plus, a different looking for group solo queue Mythic Plus rating system where even much less meta specs can still find a way to improve in score over time. It would also go very well hand in hand with this new halfway through the season power increase of your characters. So for now we only have half of this deal, the increase in power of your character, which I still think it's a quite good addition. As opposed to nothing, compare this to previous expansions, compare this to previous tiers, what was coming now was nothing. It was just a 0.5 or a 0.7 patch where you were getting some cosmetics or maybe a completely forgettable minigame, or in some cases a single item, like the first iteration of the ring we got in Dragonflight in the Siren Isle. So it's definitely better, considering the competition of this was nothing. I still think that it's better to have more ways now to improve the power of your characters, to get players to engage with the game more. There are still a few more things missing, hopefully. Shaking up the meta to further get players more excited about the patch would also be a good way to go with it. But I think that for now this would still be a good start. So This is our Wednesday, our reset day, also coming in EU, and that was our dissertation on what's been going down, on the very unique thing that has been going down halfway through this season, with so many different avenues of power increase coming between 11.1.5 and 11.1.7. So with this said and done on this Wednesday, we can now leave each other. We're starting as usual the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yep, if the sun is out, you will be hearing drilling outside. Quite the familiar sound recently, and I hope the sound ceases quite quickly.